Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the first of this series of Consult Hyperion podcasts with Mobey Forum, exploring some different aspects of the world of digital money, digital identity, digital finance as we move into 2024 and all around us see some pretty big and pretty interesting changes going on in our space. It's a great pleasure to be invited to chair the very first of these podcasts. It's my pleasure to be joined here today by three people I've had the pleasure of speaking to on several occasions about these issues, and I think you're going to learn a lot, as I will, from their conversation. Kevin is a member of the Mobey Board of Directors, joins us from Interac. Heidi is co-chair of the Digital Identity Expert Group, dialing in from Norway today. And Daniel Goldscheider from the Open Wallet Foundation is actually, I don't know, where are you, Daniel? I'm not entirely sure.
Switzerland.
Oh, dialing in from Switzerland today. Fantastic. Let me begin just by framing the discussion around digital wallets, which is the subject I want to open up today. If you look at the projections from, I mean, all of the analyst reports, broadly say the same thing, which is that digital wallets are the fastest growing segment of the payments overall market, that the rate at which the take-up of digital wallets is accelerating implies that we have what some people are calling a peak card up ahead of us. I think I'm right in saying Bain were projecting peak card for something like 2029, although with advances in instant payments and open banking, that may come a little sooner. But to people like me, the interesting thing about wallets has never really been about payments. Payments are kind of table stakes for wallets. But if you opened up my real wallet right now, it's on the desk next to me. If you opened up my real wallet right now and looked inside it, you wouldn't find any money. I mean, I generally don't use cash anyway, but what you'd find in my wallet are essentially identity documents of one form or another, credentials, if you like, tokens of reputation. What you would find are, my driving license, my loyalty cards, some credit cards and payment cards, access cards for getting into the office, the season ticket for the local soccer team. Wallets are about much more than payments. They have to have payments, otherwise people won't use them. But the reason why they're so important, and it's so strategically important for organizations to have a wallet strategy, is because of all that other stuff, not because of the payments. So I want to start by asking Daniel. Daniel, can you give us a little of the big picture, surveying the digital wallet landscape where you spend a lot of your life right now? What do you see out ahead of us in 2024?
Thank you, Dave. It's interesting to hear you talk about identity versus money, because I read an amazing book some time ago arguing that identity, in fact, is the new money. And I very much agree with that, because I think the hard part of money is actually identity. It's interesting when you look at wallets that today there are probably more document types in physical wallets than in digital wallets. And my prognosis would be that this is going to change, that eventually digital wallets are going to hold a lot more credentials than their physical ancestors ever did. You will have, of course, identity documents in there. And even in the identity space, there's quite a variety of documents, right? Things like your identity card, maybe one day your passport, your driver's license, things like a green card. You will have, of course, money in there, and money comes in different forms. You'll have tokenized credit cards and debit cards in your wallets, cryptocurrencies, CBDCs. I think digital wallets are going to play an important role in open banking as well. In Europe, there will be a mandate that banks are accepting the EUDI wallet for authentication purposes, and it will be very exciting to see where this can go. But you'll see a lot more, I think, in digital wallets, ranging from information and documents pertaining to your health or your university degrees, car keys, room keys, FIDO pass keys, replacing your passwords.
Before we move on from there, Daniel, I can't let you go past that without opening up a little bit. For people who aren't familiar with it, what do you mean by the EU digital identity wallet?
So in the European Union, there has been a regulation called EIDAS, which has specified now for some time how trust services should work and be recognized across border in the European Union. There is a new version coming into effect called the EIDAS 2, and the EIDAS 2 really is, I would say, centered around the idea of digital wallets. And there will be a reference, architecture reference framework. There is a lot of non-technical regulatory language. The hope is that we will create a wallet infrastructure in Europe that allows you to prove who you are, or to prove that you are allowed to enter a building or a university, or that you have graduated from a university, and do that with any wallet and ideally any credential all over Europe. And the hope, I think, should be that this is something that goes even beyond Europe, that eventually you can start to study in the UK, but then finish your studies in the United States without having to rely on paper, but completely rely on verifiable credentials.
And this wallet is, in essence, a smartphone app?
I would think that most people think of it primarily as a smartphone app. I think you will see wallets on smart watches. You are probably going to see cloud wallets. And eventually there may be no physical device at all, and you might have wallet functionality without any physical device. But I would agree that in the short term, the smartphone is the likely primary platform.
Now, we've got two people with us today who are in markets where so if identity is really the sort of critical center to the wallet, before we move on, let's just divert a moment to talk about that a little bit. So Heidi, you're in a market where the bank ID, the digital identity provided by the bank, is already tried, tested, central to operations. So in your market, how does digital identity stack up at the moment? I mean, I guess it's a kind of leading question. What I'm asking is, do you imagine a seamless transition from bank ID as it is now into some form of digital wallet? Or do you see a new infrastructure being developed?
I mean, hopefully we won't reinvent the wheel twice. It's one thing I can say, but the way that the digital identity in Norway function at the moment is that we have a EID wallet. The bank ID wallet is already out there. Currently is interoperable between the banks and other private user, or often or public places are using the bank ID to identify customers when logging into their services. It's functioning really well. We have 96% of the grown-up population above 15 years of age that have and use the EID on a daily basis. And it's kind of like a one-stop shop for many, because you use it both on public and private services, as I mentioned. But at the moment, it's only being used as a way of identifying yourself digitally. The question is, how can we now take what we already built and transition it into a more usable identification services, going into a more physical scenario, for example, having to identify yourself when buying alcohol or when picking up packages at the post offices, where there currently are some pilots and testing going on. But then we're already starting to think about what will happen in the case of when EIDAS 2.0 comes out. We will have an EU identity wallet. We as banks will be obliged to take this wallet into use. But how will this work interoperable? How will the interoperability between all of these EID services actually work? I think is a question that will take some months and years before we have an answer to. But it's an interesting one. How can we ensure a seamless interoperability between all of these wallets, and what sort of attributes will we be able to use across borders.
Yes,
I fully agree.
Let's come back to that interoperability point in a minute, Heidi, because I want to spend some more time on that later on. But first, I want to bring in Kevin to contrast. So in contrast to Scandinavia, in Canada, the bank digital identity is relatively new. It's still gaining traction. What does the landscape look like from your point of view, Kevin?
Yeah, I think that's a fair characterization, David, that it is gaining traction. And, we've got very strong momentum across financial services, vertical and public sector. But it's really on, digitizing, analog versions of identity. It's using bank authentication to allow Canadians to verify themselves for services easier. And I think it's interesting to think about the form factor. Your question to Daniel about what is a wallet? Is it a smartphone app? When this service launched outside of Interact's operating in 2019, it was a mobile smartphone first kind of strategy, and quickly recognized that there's a lot of friction in the acquiring and registering for a smartphone app. There's a lot of competition for the space on the home screen of a smartphone app. So we're actually moved more to sort of a cloud wallet type structure in the context of what we just spoke about. But interesting, and we're growing the market, the adoption, and the utility of it with this sort of cloud-based primary channel of access. But we are looking very clearly at more of of the traditional wallet construct, which would be an app, which enables reusable credentials, storing of credentials in a device that can be reused. Right now, our service is really transactional. Each authentication is a one time. And I like this idea of reusable credentials a lot because, convenience, you get more security out of the on-device intelligence, and it enables both digital, online, and in-person use cases. So thinking about all the different credentials and identity documents you guys have mentioned as examples in your wallets allows for a whole suite of identity type documents available. It's also more cost efficient, I think, to enable reusability in these transactions for the operators.
Yeah, I'm very interested in the reusability side of things. I think it means structural differences in the market because a lot of the documents that we have right now, I mean, a driving license is a very good example. Even within the current sort of mobile driving license initiatives, a driving license is something that's issued for, I don't know, 10 years or something like that because it's a piece of plastic. Mm-hmm. And so when you start talking about the world of reusable credentials, there's no reason why a driving license couldn't be issued for a day. I mean, I can easily imagine the situation where your wallet wakes up in the morning and goes and fetches your driving license for the day. And if your driving license gets taken away because you're DUI or done some other kind of thing, your wallet wakes up in the morning and it just doesn't get a driving license anymore. Mm-hmm. The way the market works when we go to reusable credentials, it has certain advantages in terms of cost and security, but it also kind of makes things work in a better way as well, doesn't it? I mean, that's why I'm so curious about that.
Yeah, I think you see those questions, really transcend use cases, because just like you can use a driver's license, maybe your university is revoking a degree because they've seen, they've caught you just copying or using ChatGPT. You can have a credit card that expires in 2 years from now, but it's being stolen, and you run into the same challenges. And you run into the same challenges when it comes to questions like holder binding, which is why I think it's so important to try and find answers to these questions that bridge different use cases Because if you find a really good answer in one, it's very likely that it's an interesting pointer in another, as well as crossing geographical boundaries, because you really want your digital driver's license to work in any country in the world, just like your physical driver's license does.
So we're making a transition from, if you like, the sort of old world of identity into a new world of credentials. I mean, one way that we always phrase this at Hyperion is, there's a difference between a digitized driving license and a digital driving license.
Right.
And as you've pointed out, that's true of all of the sort of facilities. But it has to work across all of these. So it has to work for Heidi. It has to work in places where we already have an ID and we're going to somehow use that ID to obtain credentials in a new wallet. It has to work for Kevin, where he's starting off in a more standards-based place. It has to work for the other Mobey members in other European countries, and frankly, it has to work for people like us in the UK as well, because it would be crazy to implement things that didn't use the same standards. That's a fair point, right, guys? Like, it doesn't matter whether you're in Europe or not. The evolution of the European digital identity wallet will drive standardization for all of us.
Definitely, I fully agree on that point, and I think coming a little bit back to what you were talking about in terms of the credentials, but also on a need to know basis what actually should be shared with the different parties. And I think the new technology and the different way that we share credentials will help us also reduce the amount of personal information that we're actually sharing at each point where we are identifying ourselves. Coming down to what I was speaking about before, having a digital way of identifying yourself when buying alcohol or when picking up your packages at the post office, and that we need to have within those standards a way of only showing, a proof saying that you are of age, you are who you are, so that you are allowed to go through with that purchase or picking up that actual package. And I think this is also, what should be part of the whole standard when thinking about it. And I think the solutions that we have today will enable this, that we are capable of identifying ourselves without actually showing, our full address, our full social security number, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I was just reading yet another, I can't remember the name of the company. I was reading earlier on about yet another data breach where people's passport details and why is the company storing these details? And of course, they don't really want your passport. They just want to know that you're over 18 or you're a UK citizen or whatever. They don't actually really need all that personal data. This is one of the reasons why I'm so optimistic about the transition to the digital wallet space. But if we move into that kind of more and so for people like Kevin who are building the infrastructure right now, building in a more standards-based environment has obvious cost advantages. And I don't think we need to go over those. I think that's all quite well understood. But if we're going to have this kind of global interoperability, then I have to ask, well, so if you're starting to build things now, you're going to be building them in a more sort of standards-based environment, and that's going to reduce costs. And we all happy with that. We all agree with it, and we all want the interoperability that comes from that. But what standards are we actually talking about at the moment, Daniel?
I think we have a couple of challenges when we talk about interoperability, let alone global interoperability. Some of those standards or some of those challenges are really political. Some countries get along very well, other countries may not get along as well. And I think it is absolutely critical that we keep talking to everyone. And personally, I think it's especially important to be compatible and have a technical basis to exchange information with people we disagree with. And then there are technical challenges. The biggest technical challenge and the most fundamental technical challenge, when you look at it on a global scale, I think, is that different countries have very different technical realities. Our friends from MOSIP keep asking questions like, what do you do if the only tool you have is a piece of paper with a QR code? And of course, in other countries, it's a reality that most people have these wonderful pocket computers called mobile phones with them that come with biometric functions and secure elements and NFC chips. And So there is a lot of fundamental challenges in terms of just very different technical realities. But even when you look at countries that all have a large installed base of mobile phones, you see that different sovereign countries are picking different credential standards, different data formats, different protocols used how to exchange those credentials. And it will take some time, if ever, to get sovereign countries to agree to use the one credential format and the one protocol to exchange those credentials.
But there are
So,
certain standards, aren't there? I mean, I can't help but notice that the ISO mobile driving license standards, for example, seem to be getting pretty broad uptake, don't they?
yeah, but there are a lot of people criticizing those, and people favoring standards like W3C or credential formats like W3C verifiable credentials or non-creds or SDJODs. Even when you look at the EUDI framework, you see that it's a combination of ISO MDL and SDJODs. And when you look at Canada, you see completely different standards being picked. And then you look at the Department of Homeland Security and you see that different departments within the Department of Homeland Security have different ideas how that should pan out. So the image that I have in my head is that the eventual end goal that we should work towards is to see if we can convene a really big tent for people to more and more agree on credential formats, on protocols, on a combination of global standards that together are going to make up a really amazing wallet. But until we
Heidi,
get there, I would think that the most likely situation is like a train that moves from one country to another. The width of the train tracks change, the current of the electricity changes, but the trains are able to deal with those problems. And I think these are the wallets that we will end up with. They'll be a little like Swiss Army knives that, when you enter a new country, it is unfortunate that the credential format of choice for a particular use case might change, but your wallet is going to be able to handle it.
so can I just ask Heidi, without giving away any gossip, what is the discussion in the identity expert group at the moment? I mean, how are you dealing with these challenges?
So currently we've started debating the question of how the EUDI wallet will affect the banks in Europe, in particularly looking at, are there still business cases for banks to issue their own digital identity wallet and engage and invest themselves in their own identity solutions? And obviously we will have, different geographies and different sizes of banks that will determine answers to these questions. But we're just starting off these discussions, asking them broadly within the group, what are the different thoughts, what are the different takes from the different regions? We have a very mature market in the Nordics. What will the EUDI look like? And then particularly for banks, are there any business opportunities here at all? And yeah, so we're very early start, but looking at wanting the banks and everyone else actually to start thinking about how will this EUDI wallet look like? What will it mean? And are there any opportunities in there, particularly for banks then?
Kevin, do you see this kind of standardization as helping you, or do you still see it as a little distant?
We watch closely, we participate, we try to influence, but it's a bit of a frustrating story, right? To see some of these standards start to emerge as a leader and then fall off to MDL, whatever. So we would love to be agnostic to standards and actually play some of that role that Daniel alluded to as the network and allowing the Swiss Army knife approach and being the entity that takes the complexity out for issuers for credential lifecycle management and for presentation. So be that translation layer, that network of network that allows multiple standards to be supported until one emerges or two or three emerge as the the Visa, MasterCard, American Express, or whatever that analogy is there, really drive international interoperability. In the Canadian space, we have a micro version of the EU with 13 jurisdictions who are the issuing authorities for identity documents in Canada, and like Daniel mentioned, they have different approaches, different economic and technical adoption postures, and so it's we're watching the EU closely to see if something important comes out that can be adopted here. But right now we're moving forward in sort of a standards agnostic approach, hoping to be able to support everything.
No, I think it is important to watch it. It's a great generalization, but I think I would characterize that for most of our larger clients, especially on the financial services side, the priority right now is to develop a wallet strategy, rather than develop the wallet itself. They don't need wallets tomorrow, but they do need a wallet strategy downstream. And so looking at what's going on, almost out of the corner of our eyes, I think for some of these things is a very valuable exercise. Well, let's finish on the sort of more optimistic note that I was I was hoping for before you told me that everyone's got different standards and none of them interoperate. Let's come back to Daniel. Daniel, can you tell us a little bit about the open wallet initiatives that you're working on and give us a little bit of optimism that the wallet strategies that people are putting together are founded in a realistic expectation of future interoperability?
I think digital wallets are not just great because they allow us to leave our analog wallets at home, but the glass half full view is that digital wallets are going to increase your privacy, they're going to increase your security, and they're going to be amazing in terms of ease of use. I believe there are a couple of different options how this could pan out, but if you want something optimistic, it seems to me that a lot of governments, a lot of companies, a lot of nonprofits share a belief that wallets should serve you, the person holding that digital wallet, just like the wallet in your pocket serves you and only you. The wallet in your pocket does not pursue any other motive. They don't want to sell your data. They don't want to sell you goods or services. Your wallet is a piece of kit that just does your bidding. And I believe that there is a consensus emerging amongst most folks that this is how we want digital wallets to behave as well. And I believe there is an opportunity to bring people together to do just that. Fundamentally, the Open Wallet Foundation is trying to do this. It is not a place that favors one credential format over another. It is not trying to compete with governments or standardization organizations. It's trying to bring as many developers, as many stakeholders as possible under one large tent to say, can we work on open source software together that will further security and interoperability across use cases and across geographical boundaries? And we've seen a lot of success, which frankly I don't attribute to us doing such an amazing job, but to the fact that it was just time as people felt instinctively that wallets is something that should bring us together rather than something that should drive us apart where everyone is just competing for their own personal business interest.
Fantastic. Thank you, Daniel. Right. Let me finish by asking you a more difficult question. I mean, each of you. I was looking at the figures from the McKinsey Digital Consumer Payment Survey 2023. And one of the things that stood out for me is that a couple of years ago, about a third of consumers had 3 or more digital wallets on their phones. And now the latest figures are that that's fallen to about a fifth. And conversely, the number of people who only have one wallet went from a fifth to a third. So basically, in the space of a couple of years, we've seen consolidation in that space, and it's consolidation in the direction that you would expect. Most people don't bother with other wallets; they just use the Apple Wallet or the Android Wallet or the Samsung Pay Wallet on their phone. So, if you look forward 3 to 5 years, do you see a competitive digital wallet space, possibly founded on identity rather than payments? Or do you see it more a question of coming to an accommodation with big tech to make sure that the big tech wallets do what we need them to do in order to improve life for consumers? Do you think there's an inevitable consolidation towards big tech, or do you think it's about coming to an accommodation with big tech to improve choice for consumers and so on, blah, blah, blah? Heidi, has this been discussed in the expert group?
I mean, for the digital identity, of course, the topics come up, who will eventually be providing that and what digital EID will everyone use. I still think it's early days. I still think there are opportunities out there to try and create something that does not necessarily have to be Apple ID or Google ID, etc. But I do think that the train is already coming towards us from big tech, and we also need to realize how to accommodate those. I don't have a clear answer to that, how that will look, but I still think it's early days, and I still think there are opportunities there to compete in that market still.
Kevin, do you think that we're going to have, just as we have 2 or 3 different credit cards in our wallet at any one time, do you think we're going to have 2 or 3 wallets? You sort of got maybe the wallet you use for business, and maybe a wallet that you use for, I don't know, you're managing your car and charging your car and things, and a wallet that you use for something else, or do you think everything marches towards a single wallet?
Yeah, the thing I can say with my crystal ball tells me with confidence is there will be multiple personas of credentials, right? So the employee, the student, the online gaming avatar, etc. Whether those become different wallets or not, I'm not so sure. I think that certain wallets will add value to a certain set of use cases beyond just credential presentation. And so I think that there is a likelihood of multiple wallets, 2 or 3, maybe 5 per user, like apps. And I think these services may just get integrated into other services through APIs or what have you. So I do see a lot of fragmentation to start. There will be a plethora, and there is today, of wallets, and certainly consolidation. Big tech is going to have a very high likelihood of success in this space, and I think we have to, make sure that what we're doing in our business strategies is compatible in some way.
It's a very, very realistic viewpoint. Daniel, do you see us using individual wallets, or, to Kevin's point, do you see the wallets disappearing into the infrastructure? So, I have my Shell app, and I have my British Airways app, and I have my Tesla app, and underneath they're all using the same wallet or the same group of wallets, but I just don't see it. I just do what I want to do, and somehow the wallet gets sorted out in the background. Or do you see me? Are we moving to this world of sort of smart wallets where I have 2 or 3 wallets on my phone and that drive all my activities?
So as far as Open Wallet is concerned, we will be happy to support, whatever reality is going to emerge. If you ask me for my personal opinion, how the world is going to develop, I would see 3 trends. The first one is, if I tried to sell you a physical wallet and you like the texture and the color, and you're about to buy it, and then I say, Dave, you should know that it only works for your driver's license, the odds are very likely that you're going to look at me astonished and say, what kind of wallet is this? So I believe that for most people in most situations, multi-purpose wallets are going to be the choice, and they're going to trump one-trick ponies. My second observation would be that well-behaved wallets, wallets that are not trying to extract money from transactions, wallets that are not trying to extract data from your transactions, wallets that are not trying to sell you something, those wallets are not going to be great business cases. It will cost a lot to build those wallets, especially because if you want to build them globally, there are so many standards and architecture reference frameworks and protocols and trust frameworks. It's difficult to build them, and it will be even more difficult to get them certified across borders. So you end up with something that is very costly, and if you do it in a way that really is in line with what I think most consumers would want from their wallets, it doesn't have a great business case attached to it. So that leaves us with the question, if the wallets we want are not great business cases or are not cut out for a great business case, who's going to provide them? And I believe that eventually we may end up in a world where we have some folks pushing wallets because they do want to extract something from those wallets. They want a walled garden. They want to further their own business objectives. My hope is that we're also going to come together and we create a wallet infrastructure that serves as digital public, a digital public good, as something that truly does your bidding. And my hope is that this is going to be at least a viable option, if not the only option.
That's a good way of putting it. But listen, guys, we've already gone on far too long. I've no idea how they're going to edit this down to half an hour. I could literally talk to you guys all day. But thank you very much for giving up part of your day. And I just want to say to everybody listening, they didn't know what questions I was going to ask them. They gave you their honest viewpoints from a professional perspective. And I hope you appreciated hearing that as much as I did. Thank you very much, everybody.